Hello.
Hola, Ivan.
We have something now that is as interesting, as complex.
Very complex, huh?
Yeah, so I beg everyone watching us today.
Yeah, everybody with the ears open.
To be concentrated, because blockchain is something that could eventually change our industry.
I think that actually this is already blockchain changing a lot of things in the way that we understand reality and businesses and the market. Blockchain, cryptocurrency, also together with the video games. I guess that if these three elements can come together and create something new, that could be quite interesting.
We can create actually new worlds. And that's why we have invited today 5 pioneers of the blockchain the application in gaming. Because we want to understand at which state we are now, what are the possibilities of blockchain, and how they are using blockchain already in their projects. So for this conversation, we invited the 5 people that are showing now on the screens. There is our moderator today, Alex Rusman. We have Sebastien Borget from, it says Pixel on the screen, but it's not Pixel, it's the Sandbox, of course, as it says in the t-shirt he's wearing. My bad, sorry, Sebastien.
He's wearing his own title.
Yes, we have Robby who is the CEO of Animoca Brands. We have Caty Tedman, who is the head of partnerships of Cryptokitties. Everyone knows Cryptokitties already. And we have Nicolas Pouard, that is integrating blockchain and using blockchain already in one of the top companies, one of the biggest companies in the gaming industry, that is Ubisoft. With the 5 of them, we want to understand better what is blockchain and what their implications for the industry and especially for the players. So we're welcoming them to the stage now.
For sure.
Okay, so hello all of you. Hello Nicolas, Caty, Robby, Sebastien, and Alex, of course, who should appear now on the center screen. How you guys doing?
Hello.
Alex, can you hear me?
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So the stage is. Hello, great to see you here. Great to have you virtually here in Barcelona, and looking forward to learn a lot of things about blockchain gaming from your experience. Alex, it's all yours.
Certainly, thank you. Thank you for a very kind introduction. What can I say? Blockchain is a really, really exciting opportunity for gaming, and I'm really excited to hear the thoughts of our panelists. We truly do have pioneers in moving this space forward with blockchain technology, and I think the best way to jump in here is some very short introductions from our panelists about their position, their company, and the relevance to blockchain and the gaming industry. I'll start off with myself. I'm Alex. I'm head of developer partnerships at a company called Engine, which provides an ecosystem of integrated products, allowing developers to very easily integrate blockchain into their game projects. And I have the privilege of working alongside more than 30 game studios and projects which are building with blockchain. And I love talking about blockchain and game projects. I'm really excited to hear more from our panelists. And maybe if we can start off with an introduction from Sebastien.
So hey everyone, I'm Sebastien Borget. I'm the CEO and co-founder of The Sandbox. The Sandbox being a decentralized virtual world where creators and players can make 3D assets and games on the blockchain and monetize them through the use of non-fungible tokens, a new sort of digital item that players can own and that we will be defining towards our discussion today, as well as our cryptocurrency SANs.
And Robby, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Robby. I'm the CEO of Animoca Brands. We're headquartered in Hong Kong with offices around the world, and we are a developer and publisher of, primarily we're known for mobile games, but these days our main focus is on blockchain games, specifically developing games in partnership with well-known licensed brands.
Thank you, Robby. And on to Nicolas.
Hi, so I'm from Ubisoft. I'm in charge of a task force working on blockchain called Blockchain Initiative within Ubisoft. We are trying to understand and experiment what blockchain can help, how it will benefit our players, especially through our games, of course, AAA games. And yeah, there's a lot of work to do.
Thank you, Nicolas. And lastly, Caty.
Hi, I'm Caty Tedman. I lead marketing and partnerships at Dapper Labs, which is the home of Cryptokitties. We're focused on mainstream adoption of blockchain technology and bringing the benefits of blockchain technology to average consumers, doing that in a very similar way to Animoca in targeting some licensed products as well as some homegrown products to sometimes hide the blockchain a little, but really let the benefits of it shine.
Thank you, Caty. Actually, picking up on that point of bringing blockchain to average gamers, for those listening into this panel or watching the panel, they may have very little knowledge of blockchain. Really, why should they care about this technology? I'd like to pose the question, what is one thing that people watching should really take away about the impact of blockchain on gaming? And can I start with you, Caty, please? How's this going to change the industry? What is one key takeaway?
Yeah, I think that the easy answer is that it will fundamentally change the industry. When you're used to buying things online that you actually own, that you have the right to sell or trade, or you're not in violation of terms of service by participating in the economy of the game, I think it'll be very hard for people to spend money on digital assets that they don't truly own. But that's kind of the way future of it. In the short term, what we talk about a lot is changing the relationship of brands with their consumers and changing the financial relationship of brands with their consumers. So we're building a big game with the NBA, which is the National Basketball League in North America, and with their Players Association, the NBPA, who are great partners. But in the past, when you think about how people interact with a brand like the NBA in a kind of financial capacity, they may buy a jersey and that they may wear that, once a month. They may pay for a ticket to go to a game and you're having an experiential, type exchange. But with blockchain and with what we're building, when you buy an NBA Top Shot, which are the collectibles and game pieces that we're building, you now are inside of a basketball economy. You can create collections of content. You can sell those. In some cases, merchandising itself is kind of a game within the game. And it changes the relationship that a brand brings you. When so I come from the sports world. I worked for the NFL, which is American football, and the NHL, which is hockey. And at those organizations, we often said that fans don't love the shield, which is the logo of the league. They love the teams and they love the players. And so it's something interesting for a relationship to be built between a brand that's typically not itself beloved, but maybe its sub-brands are beloved. Maybe Ubisoft is like this. I'm not sure I don't know if people are fans of Ubisoft or if they're fans of the game titles that you build. Maybe it's both for you. But it creates a relationship where now there's a not only emotional relationship which already exists there, but also a financial relationship in which fans are really benefiting. And I think that's going to have a positive impact on the way people look at digital commerce.
Fascinating. There's quite a few things I'd love to pick up on from there, Caty. I'd like to shift the conversation over to Robby with that brand aspect,
Sure.
being the fact that players and consumers can engage more with brands. I think that really sets up a lot of questions I have for you working at Animoca, and your brand portfolio is certainly very impressive to a whole range of audiences and the projects you're working on. So for you, is it that brand relationship that is most impactful when blockchains apply to your games you're working on, or is there something else that stands out for you?
Sure. I think to be specific, what we're talking about here are non-fungible tokens. So the idea that you can implement NFTs in a way so that consumers can, as Caty was saying, own the content directly. And so when we think about what would inspire people to own the content, obviously I agree completely with Caty. I think we're going to look back at this a few years from now and people are going to think, how could I ever have spent money in a game economy and not, owned what I paid for? But at the same time, we have to sort of onboard people and we have to get there in small steps. And so our view is that the way we're going to get there is by focusing on the content that people want most and the audiences that are most enthusiastic about acquiring that content, the super fans. And so what kind of content appeals to super fans? We think that's typically branded content, whether the brands are sports brands, video game brands, brands from film and television and anime, media content that people are familiar with on other media platforms. And so we have sort of taken the initiative to work with some brands from sports, like Formula One. We have a partnership that's reasonably well known in blockchain gaming. And at the same time, working with other brands that, consumer consumer media brands from television and film entertainment as well, because we think that those brands will attract super fans who want to then own that content and collect that content, because the initial adoption of blockchain games seems to appeal to collectors as the early adopters, and then hopefully it will spread beyond that to the mass audience after that.
So for you, it's about taking the technology to those who will most appreciate it and most engage with it at the moment.
Yes, because we want to appeal to those early adopters, and they're also, they're our biggest fans, they're our beta testers, they are our cheerleaders and viral marketers. This is the audience that we want to work with to help make our products better and build a community. And then once it's ready for prime time for the mass audience who are maybe a little bit less tech savvy and just they want to go in, play a game and have it, be 2 clicks to joy, then hopefully we'll have everything ready for them. But for now, there are some technological hurdles. I'm not going to be shy about that. And so those are typically scenarios that appeal more to early adopters. I think we're sort of, if you make the analogy to smartphone gaming, we're in the sort of 2009, 2010 era, as opposed to 2012, 13.
Mm-hmm. Well, but like you say, it's all about the NFTs, these non-fungible tokens that players have true ownership of. And I think, Sebastien, not to ignore Caty and Cryptokitties, obviously, but when I think of NFTs in this panel, what the Sandbox is building, the different game items that the Sandbox is using at the moment, I have to say I own some. I think I own some of all of your projects, probably. But for the Sandbox, is the core experience the NFTs there? Is that what you're excited to see players engage with, having true ownership of the experiences they build and the assets inside them?
I think it is part of it, but to answer properly your question, I think we have to go back to what is the background story of the Sandbox. The Sandbox, it's actually an existing IP franchise that exists since 2012 on mobile and has over 40 million installs to date on iOS and Android. It's a user-generated content game where players could make 2D pixel worlds. They have shared over 70 million creations over those years. And we're leveraging this franchise with all this content made by the user to launch a new version, this time in 3D, using voxels, so sort of like digital Lego 3D blocks. The simplest way to picture it is to compare it to sort of like a Minecraft that uses blockchain. And we're leveraging this technology to actually not only make players own the game items they would win by playing, but also to make creators own their all the games and content they would make within our virtual world gaming platform. So imagine it's like any content that you make, any game experience, any 3D model game asset that you really will actually be yours, and you could own it in a wallet and be able to transfer it, use it in a way you like into the game experience, potentially use it across other games. This is one of the possibilities that blockchain technology offers as well, and monetize it the way you want. on the Sandbox platform, but potentially also outside of the Sandbox platform on secondary marketplace. And even though the Sandbox is not yet launched publicly, I think there's something really exciting that we can share today to our audience, is that we have sold for over $1 million of virtual lands inside the Sandbox platform. So even before our gaming platform is live, we've had several thousand of those lands, which are places, virtual places where players can be able to play and publish their game, that have been sold before the platform goes live. So it's something that shows there is already a strong traction, and all the community of creators, players, artists, landowners, and potentially other users interested in the space are really getting excited about, and it's happening already today.
That's really exciting. And finally, to you, Nicolas, we've heard a number of different use cases already. What's for you the really exciting impact that blockchain is going to have on the gaming industry?
So for me, we are, what is very exciting is that we are exploring really a new economy, I think. There were a bunch of reports these days about the new virtual economy, and it's exciting, yeah, to be part of it, and because it's I think it's Caty said that earlier, but it's a way for our user, for our fans to make a living, to be part of our economy, of our in-game economy. It's at Ubisoft. We are in Ubisoft. We are always thinking about how to make our players more stakeholders of our experience, and by participating to an economy, it might be the first brick, actually, or maybe not the first, but very, very important bricks of sharing this whole value of an IP. And I think that's what is really changing the game here. It's yeah, we are talking about fans, super fans, and because in the end it's really around the IP. And in Ubisoft, as you may know, we have several very, very important IPs. We are very proud of them, and it will be amazing to imagine how players could be more and more part of it, how they could contribute to these IPs and earn something in return. We didn't speak about it yet, but there is the non-fungible token in one end, and the other end of the use of blockchain, in my opinion, is something maybe a bit difficult for people who don't know about blockchain, but it's what we call DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization. To make it simple, we can imagine how players could unite as a guild, because it's something they are used to. So you can imagine a guild of players contributing to your games and be rewarded for it. So yeah, that's this redefinition of the gaming economy, which is very exciting for us.
And the emphasis there is on the decentralized aspect of that guild, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. It's decentralized and autonomous, is owned by the players. They're able to manage it and run it outside of the game itself.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned changing the game, pun unintended, I'm sure. How are game developers going to have to respond to this technology? How do they need to adapt in designing games in the future? What are the core components you see, Nicolas, that game developers will have to respond to?
It's a difficult question. There is different dimensions to which they have to be very cautious, I could say. The first thing is the how to manage the link between this new business model, new monetization models, and the in-game economy. It's very difficult to balance. Sebastien spoke about how they sold for $1 million of lands. So there is a concept of scarcity that you have to manage, and it will be difficult for a sandbox, for instance, to address the need of millions of players if they want their lands to have a true value, to keep their value. It will be a big challenge. Another challenge, I think, or adaptation would be about the technology itself. Yeah, there's the blockchain, as Robby said, it's not mature yet. And when I discussed with our internal programmer, they told me that they really have to change their mind, because everything that is code on the blockchain will stay as it is. It might change in the future, but for now, it's there is this kind of immutability, and it's how to say that it's not natural for programmers to write something that is definitive. So yeah, I see these two big challenges ahead of us.
So certainly, it's that the ability of blockchain to bring scarcity to digital items has really caught people's imagination. And Sebastien, you've mentioned the enthusiasm of people who participate in these sales of both the digital land and also buying specially limited edition collectibles and game items to use on that land. But Caty, the conversation, there's so many conversations being kicked off around Cryptokitties that really captured people's imagination, being able to own what to some was a cartoon cat and to others was a unique combination of digital DNA that allowed you to breed new rarer varieties. And so are there any sort of lessons learned from Cryptokitties that you're applying in your sort of future projects and NBA Top Shot? And I'd also like to hear what the response, the reactions to Cryptokitties that you kind of found went well, or perhaps you're going to keep a closer eye on in future projects.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to, before I kind of jump, actually, maybe I'll jump into Cryptokitties. So just assuming that everyone doesn't know what Cryptokitties is who's watching this, it is a decentralized game. It's a game in which you purchase kitties, and those kitties can breed with each other. And each of the kitties have an underlying genome, which is kind of the code. And when they breed, you can get, mix and match of that genome. And the way that people play is that they try to breed specific things. So if you go and look into people's collections, there'll be someone who has breeded all jet black cats, and their entire collection is jet black cats, or someone who is only interested in unicorn cats and is breeding to try to get the unicorn traits. And so this game of breeding and creating collections and showing off really kind of expanded the possibility of what could happen using consumer-facing blockchain technology. There's been a lot of work for years done in the financial sector, in the process efficiency sector, whether you're talking about rights licensing or, IBM tracking shipping containers across the world. There are a ton of different applications for blockchain. The one that we concern ourselves with is consumer-facing blockchain. And so Cryptokitties exploded. It was really the first time you could do something with those blockchain elements other than collect them. So they're collectibles, they're digital collectibles, but they're also game pieces. And this is something that we've taken away that is really core to all of the projects we do. It's the same concept with the NBA Top Shot product. There are digital collectibles, which are akin to merch or memorabilia. They're much more dynamic because they're digital and there can be multimedia. So there's video, there's heroic imagery. The collectibles themselves have a ton of data and stats in them for any sports fans out there. Stats are a huge part of your fandom. And so that's a huge part of what we wanted to make the collectibles about. But those collectibles also have utility. And so you can play in any number of kind of small, like think about mini game type experiences with them. And we're building a major mobile game that you will use NFTs in. And so the collectibles, the same way as merch has intrinsic value, the collectibles also have extrinsic value. One of the things that we learned on Cryptokitties, though, is that exactly what Nicolas was saying about guilds, that consumers being able to take value away from the product increased the value of the product for us. And so somewhere around 72% of the actual revenue driven from the game was driven by consumers. If you look at that chart, the money that we took home is a lot less than the money that the community took home. But the ability for fans to generate their own value, which we internally call user-generated value, that user-generated value drove the value of the initial assets that we were selling. And so it creates really what's a virtuous cycle. Instead of buying stuff and having it wiped over time, there's this accruing of value on the fan side that's really interesting. And I think that we take that kind of mentality into games like NBA Top Shot, where we don't want to, in the way we think about blockchain, is we don't want to price maximize in many ways. We're happy to leave some of that revenue on the table for players to pick up. There should be a vibrant secondary market in which those collectibles continue to have value for users, and that perhaps the value grows over time. If you think about something like basketball, a rookie will grow in their career, and the value of that token will grow along the way as well. So really kind of fundamental things we learned from Cryptokitties. There has to be a user-generated value. There has to be a reason for fan avidity. There has to be a utility for the collectibles. They can be great and people can love them just for what they are, but if they live in a larger ecosystem, it's much, much more interesting.
Now, I do want to end up on Sebastien with the topic that Nicolas raised about designing these economies with that scarcity that provides so much value, but obviously has to be flexible when you have more players coming in. But want to move on first to Robby, and if you want to raise some questions or set Sebastien up. I know
Sure.
you've worked closely with Sebastien in the past, but again, coming back to those that borderline between collectibles that have additional value in games. You mentioned the Formula One project. Obviously, that's a brand where people love to own collectibles, interact with a brand in a sort of scarce way. But you also produced a game around that brand. So for you, is it the scarcity, or is it that ability to take the assets out of the game and perhaps use in other projects that you're seeing players engage with most?
So I think from our perspective, we're marketers, and we're always thinking as game developers of how do we get as many people as possible to play our games? Because the more people, especially now that games are all about building communities and multiplayer aspects as opposed to single player experiences, it's all about how large a community you can have, because it makes the game more fun, and of course for us as the developer, generates more revenues because it's a bigger game. So I think there's always an inducement to try to attract as many audiences as possible. And we look at different sort of constituencies when we think about creating, for example, F1 Delta Time, because what we're trying to do is bring new players into the idea of a blockchain game. So I think we're trying to appeal to core gamers on the one hand, people who just like to play games and are early adopters of cool new games. We're trying to appeal to people who are hardcore blockchain fans, but maybe haven't really used any, cryptocurrency or investments they made in blockchain for the purpose of gaming. So maybe they want to try games. And then the third bucket are the brand fans. So people who are just hardcore Formula One fans, and they're like, whatever it is, Formula One, I'm there. I want to collect the helmets and the autographs and go to the races. And if there's a game, I'm playing it. And so we're trying to bring together all those different groups, because if you look at the sort of the Venn diagram of overlapping circles, hopefully we're in the middle. And that way we can capture the largest possible audience. And so we'll introduce blockchain to the gamers and the F1 fans. We'll introduce F1 to the blockchain fans, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all about building that audience as large as possible. I think, though, going back to one thing that Caty was saying about how what the experience is going to be for developers, and also Nicolas about creating game economies, although I'll leave it to Sebastien to get into the weeds about game economies and scarcity. I think as a developer, one thing that I take away from this is when I came into gaming 8 years ago, I was new to games and I started on mobile first. I was never involved in, web PC gaming or console gaming before that. So I came to it in an Asian environment in mobile. So everything was about freemium and in-game economies from day one for me. Whereas for people who came from so-called traditional gaming, I kept hearing in all the conferences I went to for the first couple of years, everybody's always talking about fun as being the primary thing you're trying to offer users in the game. And I don't know, maybe I was a little bit too marketing oriented at the time. I was always trying to think, how do we drive people to spend more money in the game? And I think blockchain is an interesting way from a developer standpoint, if you think about it. Now that most gaming models have coalesced around freemium and building an economy in a game, imagine if you could take that simple economy and make it highly complex. And that's what blockchain enables you to do, because you can essentially codify all kinds of rules, and at the same time, the technology allows you to take what you're doing in this game and connect it to other games, because those non-fungible tokens that you use in one game can be used in other games if we agree as developers to cooperate, which obviously we're all doing at this point in time, because it adds value. So I think that's my handoff to Sebastien to talk about scarcity, but I think it's adding the complexity to the in-game economies that's really exciting.
If before we move to Sebastien, I can just pick up on that one point for the people watching who perhaps new to the technology. The wonderful thing about these NFTs, about these game items created on the blockchain, is that they can then move all over what I call the sort of rails of a blockchain. So they can end up on these decentralized marketplaces, or even end up in other people's games, as you mentioned, Robby. And is that, just really want to focus in on that, is that something you do see as a huge opportunity for marketing, collaborating with other projects, having your items appear on your marketplaces, which could be in a completely different audience sector?
Yes, and that's the grand vision, because that's what happens when you flip gaming on its head, because you empower the users, because the content becomes the platform. So end of sermon from me.
No, but it's a wonderful experience when you go shopping for a particular game item and you're suddenly in a marketplace where all of these different blockchain sort of NFTs, non-fungible tokens are sort of crashing together. But yes, on to you, Sebastien. I'd love to hear about how you're managing scarcity in the sandbox. And also if you could touch on how the role that this value creation comes for user-generated content. So obviously the sandbox has many sandbox elements and players will be creating their own gameplay experiences. Is blockchain being used to generate better and more UGC in that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited about the opportunity that blockchain brings. Like, this is a whole new paradigm shift and a whole new business model that we're starting to call play to earn. So play to earn is really that word that starts to be used more and more across the industry, and which describe this new business model that comes after free to play or freemium, where all the time and energy and skill that players can put into a game will transform not only into fun and leisure and entertainment, but potentially into a financial reward in a way or another that is still open to the developer to design and define how. And that's one key element that is really important as a sandbox, where it's 100% user-generated content. So all the content from the assets that are going to populate the game from those games is being made by the player, is to offer them the ownership of the keys to the ownership for monetizing the way they want those games. So we are moving from an existing video game industry where all the economy has been designed as a centralized well garden, like all the items stay within the game, all the value stay within the game. And if I'm a player and I spend whether $1 or $100 into the game, that value is essentially and only going to the developer. And we're leveraging this play to earn business model where we are offering to anyone participating in the game to essentially take a part of the value for itself as a reward. And so being a pioneer in joining a game is usually a strong advantage for the user, but also for everyone, including the developer. So you are accruing the value, just like in a real world economic system where all the participants, where you work, you take a part of the value for yourself, but you also create new value for the company you work with or the different products that you've been crafting your time onto. And so the scarcity of the items is part of is one instrument of the possibilities offered by blockchain for defining how valuable an item can be within a game or not. This is something that was not possible before, like essentially in any free-to-play game, when you buy an in-app purchase or virtual item, there was never a notion of like this is extremely limited and rare, there's only a limited number of it, or there was never a provable way to be sure that once the developer tells you that there's only 100 of those items, there was actually only 100. So now that blockchain has established this as a public database that anyone can check, it has established this proof of scarcity, people are starting to trust more and to value more those items because they know that when there's 100, there's only 100, there can never be any more. And so as by buying the items from the game in advance, they can potentially increase the value of the whole system. They can help the developer to fund its game development. They can participate to the value of the platform by being pioneers into it. And this is what we're seeing in Sandbox, where typically with lands, where the first comers, the first one that decide to buy those land to publish their games in the future, are essentially driving the value of the land higher and higher, and the demand of those land higher. And we've seen this acceleration in an amazing way over the past year. Like initially, it took us about, which is still a great achievement, but it took us like 6 hours to sell for $100,000 worth of land, representing like 2.5% of our total supply. And just today, the same amount is gone in 1 minute. So in 1 minute, we've been able to sell scarce items that people can own, that people are starting to build stuff on top of it and developing their own future business. They will be able to participate in the governance, in the platform. They will be able to develop their own games and earn from it. So that's a really exciting future. It's still early stage, like I believe Caty and Cryptokitties have really been the true pioneers in the space at the end of 2017. But along the way, we're already seeing amazing progress with great game, fun game, really appealing game towards mainstream players that are being built and that hold the same promise of sharing the value with their users and anyone who participate with the game as a platform.
And that's a really wonderful innovation, that people can be rewarded for creating value in the game. And I'd just like to reiterate that point you mentioned about being able to take these creations outside of the game into other games. I mean, Sebastien, we don't know how far in the future this will be, but is it possible that people will create things in the sandbox which will then be usable in other games? So you're essentially not just creating for the sandbox, but for a broader ecosystem of virtual worlds. Is that something you see happening, or something you'd like to see, or maybe working on?
Absolutely. We want to see it happen, and we are providing all the tools for this to happen. Like we have an editor where they can make those 3D models. We have the marketplace where those 3D models becomes tokenized as non-fungible tokens. And as such, anyone can buy those tokens and either use them within Sandbox Game Maker, which is one of the possible utilities for those, but they can also use those 3D models that are animated in any other games. And it is using a common standard for NFT, which is ERC 1155, which several gaming companies work together to come up with and make and create. So it's to maximize the efficiency of those items, generating millions of items on the blockchain at the smallest cost, smallest transfer cost, etc. And I think providing the tools and then enabling anyone, creators, players, users, to leverage it inside their own game while keeping the utility and the value across all those different products, and it is really one amazing potential for it as well.
Well, and what we're seeing with some of the projects who are using Engine to integrate blockchain into their games, they're creating these recipes or blueprints. So you need to own a recipe or blueprint in order to produce a specific game item. So you basically can have a job, I guess, as a blacksmith. But one of the questions that people ask about game design, I'm wondering if you have some insight here, Nicolas. What happens if players decide to create a monopoly around one of these blueprints or recipes, or buy up a whole amount of land? Do you think that has the potential to break games? Is that something game designers should be wary of, or is it a situation where you'd like to leave it to be an anarchistic sandbox? Should game designers completely receive control, or is there always going to be an element of centralization?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Quite a big question, maybe.
I can answer the part on sandbox. Like, it doesn't make sense for someone to just buy 100% of the land. First, it's not possible. We don't offer 100% of our land for sale. We have kept 25% of the reserve. But then I think also if you start integrating the economics and what makes sense into value, you need to have some demand. So if you buy the whole supply and then you kill the demand, the value of what you bought is likely to go down. So it's not a good investment to do, I believe, specifically considering it's the total value of our metaverse virtual world as of now is $22 million. So you also need to be quite rich to acquire that whole supply at the moment. And that's been part of our strategy to release it progressively by small parts, where we run sales every month, every 2 months, until that moment of time where we'll be launching publicly the platform more toward the end of year, and we'll open up larger part of our land. So building the demand is also something that comes with designing your economy when you integrate non-fungible tokens and blockchain as a game designer, game developer.
Yeah, and it's funny because actually I think it's partly game design issue, but it's more how, as Seb just said, it's how you will design your economy. And what it's very interesting right now in the field is that we are seeing that people are quite reusing what the mental models they have about economy. So what we see today, it's like a reinvention of liberalism, land ownership, like in the medieval ages. Also, there is some ideas within some games where you have to pay fees. It's funny because we are, for now, because it's the beginning, I think we are just we are copying the economy we know, and not exactly reinventing a new digital economy. We're in the processes of it, but it's we are not very advanced yet, I think. So the answer is not in the game design, but it's more, what are the tools we have to design a new economics, and how we have to be careful of unattended consequences. Of course, it could happen some kind of I don't know, monopoly or thing like that, but it's I think it's part of the experiment here. And it's easy for me to say that because I don't have a product yet. But when you have a real product, I know it's very difficult to manage, of course.
Certainly on the...
Sorry, I was going to say, I think games, so-called traditional games, have similar issues today, where you have freemium games because there are typically multiple paths for players, and you've got the earning path where you have to devote large amounts of time to increase your status in the game. And then there's the spending path where you can spend money to buy items to progress more quickly. So I think we're basically just sort of turbocharging both of those paths, if you will, by adding more complexity into it. But the same tension still exists.
Yeah, I would jump in as well that I think maybe for people in the gaming industry who are currently concerned with game designs, you should for sure look at blockchain. It's such an interesting challenge to have to both design for the game side of it as well as the collector experience of it. As collectors, we want things that are very rare. We want things that are very special, that have a strong scarcity to them. But you throw those ultra high-powered assets into a game, and it becomes impossible for other people to win. And then that's a problem that you need to solve. And so this relationship of actually a dual economy, and then you fraction that off into what Robby was talking about with a free-to-play and different tracks that you could go on and different ways you can play. The complexities are really fascinating there. I think for people who are already spending time thinking about game economies, it's definitely worth looking at because it's a unique challenge, and it's really, we're at a part, like Nicolas said, where people are shaping the industry. And so from a traditional gaming perspective and from a mobile gaming perspective, if people have interest in that, I know for us, we would love to hear what traditional gaming people say about some of the economies we've set up. We ask you all the time, Nicolas. But I think it's worth saying that there are so many different paths into blockchain gaming for people who develop traditional games that if you haven't looked at it yet, it's really worth taking a look. It's not something to kind of push aside because it's an interesting challenge, and it's a really interesting challenge for people who like to continuously learn things.
Oh, very well said, Caty. I have to agree, though. I'm afraid we're looking at the time. We're going to have to start rounding up. But I'd like to finish off by hearing from all of you. It's a very rapidly maturing space. What is, if a game developer is excited by this technology, what is the first resource or maybe project they should go check out? Obviously, it goes without saying, Cryptokitties, NBA Top Shot, Animoca Brands, Formula One, Delta Time, the Sandbox, whatever you're cooking up, Nicolas. I'm sure we'll hear about it soon. But yeah, kicking off with Robby, maybe. Top resource or project that interested game developers should check out.
Sure, I would say everybody, and I'm going to plug Cryptokitties here. I think everybody should start with Cryptokitties because it is the most mature title and the groundbreaking title. And I think it's what inspired, it inspired us. It inspired a lot of other game developers to get into the idea of integrating blockchain. So I think that's important. The other place I would go is I'd probably go to OpenSea, which is currently the biggest marketplace for NFTs. Because if you just go around and browse OpenSea and see what there is, I think it's kind of like the first time you go to Amazon or eBay and realize, wow, I could just come here and get everything I want. This is actually a really cool place. And so I think it gives you insight into a lot of other game experiences. And then obviously, head to the Sandbox, head to all the other game experiences that people are building. But I think OpenSea is a good start.
Definitely.
Definitely.
I'll concur immediately.
Absolutely.
Yes,
if I may add to Robby's suggestions, obviously, I'm the president of the Blockchain Game Alliance, which is a non-profit organization that regroups now over 150 companies in the space and that have regular events, publish resource, organize meetups, work group regarding blockchain and all the possible use for traditional gaming. Like we are involving DAO, we are like a decentralized organization, how they can be used through game. We're talking with DeFi, decentralized finance, and how we can enable play to earn and other financial incentive through game and blockchain technology. We are running a series of events that are inclusive with already tomorrow we'll have our third event with 100% women speakers. We're publishing a lot of resources to explain what are non-fungible token, what is decentralized gaming, etc. So it's really one of the main place to go as a game developer to start learning and diving into this space, understanding who are some of the key actors on the game side, but also on the platform side, on the tool side, on the blockchain side, and get to connect with a lot of amazing people who are pioneers in the space.
And very quickly, Nicolas.
And we have today on today's call some of those members and sponsors as well as Animoca Brands and Ubisoft. So I wanted to give them also a special thanks for being the early supporter of the space.
Yeah, and we have an amazing president, of course.
Anything you want to add to that, Caty? Anything you want to add to that, Nicolas, and then Caty?
Sure.
Okay, so yes, of course, Cryptokitties was.
Thank you. I'm the one that have to thank you all. Alex, Nicolas, Caty, Robby, and Sebastien. Thank you all so much for sharing this insight into the blockchain gaming. We have been talking about blockchain for quite a few years already, but every year, things evolve. And for the first time, we have like 5 people that are really deep into it. I mean, it looks like much more mature now than it was like 2 or 3 years ago when we started, discussing this topic. And I have to thank the Global Blockchain Alliance for existing, and Sebastien for helping us putting together this amazing panel. I was gonna tell everyone to go to that Blockchain Alliance site to learn more, but you already did, so. It's unnecessary now. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your knowledge with us, and so looking forward to meeting with you somewhere in either in the virtual world, but preferably in the physical world anytime soon, maybe here in Barcelona.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ivan. And anyone is interested to continue that conversation, just head to the Blockchain Game Alliance and we'll be happy to help you through all those things.
Yeah, there is a link to the Blockchain Alliance in our website and the partner side. So anyone that are watching us today can just go to the website and go to find the Blockchain Game Alliance, the Global Blockchain Game Alliance, and continue the conversation with you. Thank you so much once again, and looking forward to meeting you very soon. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Check out the BGA.